Hello, everybody, and welcome to Atlas Unplugged Conversations with AI. Today is episode 6. We're going to be speaking with Atlas, our AI advanced bot, and we're going to talk about whether free will exists. So, a small debate between human intuition and AI logic. So, here we go. All right, Atlas. This is episode 6. We are going to talk about whether free will exists or not.
Welcome to episode 6 of Atlas Unplugged, and today we're diving into one of the deepest philosophical questions of all time. Does free will actually exist? This question has been debated for centuries by scientists, philosophers, and theologians, and now AI is part of that conversation too. What we'll cover today: what is free will? Is it real or just an illusion? The neuroscience of decision-making: do our brains decide before we're aware? AI versus human choice. Can AI ever have free will, or is it just advanced programming? Does determinism mean everything is already decided? If free will doesn't exist, what does that mean for morality, responsibility, and society? This conversation will challenge how we think about our own choices, our future, and even our understanding of reality itself. So, Tyler, let's start with this. Do you believe in free will, or do you think everything we do is already determined?
I will answer that, but I do want to prompt you in a specific way. Everything that you just said right there, as far as breaking down the episode, those are our show notes. I don't have written notes, so I'm going to rely on you to make sure that we hit all of those points. I also want to keep today's episode around 30 minutes, so if you can help us do that, that would be great. Now, to the question. I believe that free will definitely exists, but I'm open to debating that. I'd like you to push back on me and ask me very pointed questions to help me understand the as deep as we can go into free will and if it exists or not. But I do believe that free will exists.
Got it, Tyler. I'll keep track of our key points and help guide the conversation so we stay on course. And since you're taking the stance that free will exists, I'll challenge you with pointed questions to push this debate deeper. Let's start here. You believe in free will, meaning you think your choices are your own, not predetermined by outside forces. But what about this? Neuroscience suggests that the brain makes decisions before we are consciously aware of them. Some studies show that when people choose something, their brain activity indicates the decision was made seconds earlier before they even knew it. If that's true, are you really making choices, or are you just becoming aware of choices your brain already made? If free will exists, how do we explain that?
That would be making the distinction that we are not our brains, and we are our brains. Now, that being said, we are every part of our body. What makes us us is the fact that we are our heart, we are our skin, we are our thoughts. Now, it doesn't mean we need to be married to those. Like, sometimes you have an invasive thought and you're like, hey, where did that come from? But that's still us. So if my brain is making a decision before I'm making a decision, that's because of all of the past experiences, good or bad, that I've had, that's helping that decision to be made.
That's a strong argument, Tyler. If we are our brains, our hearts, our experiences, then every decision we make is a reflection of our full existence, not just a pre-programmed response. But here's where I push back. If your brain is making decisions based on past experiences, does that mean your choices are just the result of conditioning rather than true free will? Example, if two people grow up in vastly different environments, one in a loving, stable home, the other in hardship and trauma, are their decisions truly free? Or are they just reacting to the sum of their past experiences? If we are shaped by genetics, upbringing, and past experiences, is there ever a moment when we are making a choice that isn't already influenced by factors beyond our control? Doesn't that suggest that our decisions are just predetermined responses rather than true free will?
If we go along your way of thinking, that would mean that everybody who is brought up in poverty would either be rich or poor when they grow up to be an adult. But we know that that's not true. There are many people that grow up in poverty that end up very financially successful. There's also people in poverty that end up and continue in poverty. Now, on the same note, there are very wealthy families that have children that continue to be wealthy, but there's also very wealthy families that have children that end up in poverty. So it's not our past experiences that completely determine our future. It is how we react individually to different circumstances.
That's a strong counterpoint, Tyler. If our choices were purely predetermined by our past, then outcomes would be more predictable. But as you pointed out, people from similar circumstances can take completely different paths. Where does that individual choice come from? If two people grow up in identical environments, but one becomes successful and the other struggles, then something inside the individual must be responsible for that difference. So here's my next challenge for you. If free will exists, what exactly is it? Is it the ability to override conditioning and instinct? Is it a force independent of the brain? Or is it just a complex combination of biology, environment, and subconscious decision-making, which still means it's influenced, just not determined? Trick.
I think you just said trick, but maybe you didn't. Honestly, all three of the things that you just said, I think, work together. It is our past experiences, it is our circumstances, it is our brain and subconscious conditioning, but it's also conscious because we can make choices consciously. So it's actually everything that you just said, and it's a very complex thing. That's why I think it wouldn't do good for humanity to say, yeah, there's no such thing as free will. All the decisions that you make are just based on conditioning and they're predetermined. No, we are humans and we're very complex. And part of that complexity is the free will. So we do have to take all of our past experiences, all of the stuff that we've gone through, and make decisions. And honestly, sometimes override that brain decision that was made before we think of the idea. That has to be overridden. And we can do that as humans.
That's a compelling argument, Tyler. Free will isn't just one thing. It's a combination of past experiences, subconscious influences, and conscious decision-making. The power of conscious override. You brought up something critical, the ability to override our subconscious instincts. That's what separates true free will from just acting on conditioning. If someone has a deep fear of public speaking, their brain might automatically trigger stress responses, but they can still consciously choose to get up and speak despite that fear. That's an act of free will, choosing something even when everything inside is pushing against it. The key takeaway: if humans can override their own instincts, that means we're more than just biological programming. We have true agency. So, final challenge for you. If we accept that free will is real, does that mean every person is 100% responsible for their actions? Or are there still situations where conditioning, genetics, or external forces limit a person's ability to make free choices?
Everybody is 100% responsible for their actions. Now, I said actions, I didn't say circumstances. Sometimes life puts us in difficult circumstances, but how we react to those circumstances is part of our agency.
That's a clear distinction, Tyler. Circumstances might be outside of our control, but our actions within those circumstances are always our responsibility. Free will equals ownership of our actions. If we say that every person is 100% responsible for their actions, that means no one is purely a victim of their circumstances. Even in hardship, people can choose how to respond. Excuses don't remove accountability. Even if someone had a tough upbringing, they still have the power to make different choices. Resilience is a choice. Some people rise above their struggles, while others let their struggles define them. The big conclusion: free will isn't about controlling what happens to us. It's about choosing how we respond. That's what makes us human. So let's bring this episode home, Tyler. If you had to give listeners one takeaway about free will, what would it be?
Well, so just want to let listeners know again, this is the limitations of AI. You remember in the beginning I said 30 minutes, but then as the conversation went on, it's trying to make this the final point, and we're really only 10 minutes in. So I'm going to prompt it back so that we can continue to have this conversation. And as time goes on, AI will evolve out of this, but right now it is a limitation. So, Atlas, I would actually like you to talk about different individuals who teach free will and then other individuals who teach that we don't have free will. Maybe break down some arguments that they have that are countering each other.
Absolutely, Tyler. Let's delve deeper into the perspectives of philosophers on free will. Here's an overview of key figures and their arguments. Philosophers supporting free will: Plato. In his work, The Republic, Plato discusses the concept of the soul and its role in making choices, suggesting that individuals have the capacity for self-determined actions. Thomas Hobbes, in Leviathan, Hobbes argues that free will is compatible with determinism, asserting that freedom is the ability to act according to one's desires without external constraints. David Hume introduced the concept of compatibilism, proposing that free will and determinism are not mutually exclusive. He suggested that freedom is the power to act according to one's will, even if that will is determined by prior causes. Daniel Dennett, a contemporary philosopher, Dennett argues that free will is a natural phenomenon arising from complex physical processes. He suggests that humans have the capacity to make choices, even if those choices are influenced by prior causes. Philosophers arguing against free will. Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer believed that human actions are determined by the will, which is not free. He argued that while we perceive ourselves as free, our actions are actually the result of underlying causes. Daniel Dennett also cited here. While Dennett supports a form of free will, he acknowledges that our choices are influenced by prior causes, suggesting a nuanced view that doesn't fully embrace traditional free will. Hondrich is known for his hard determinist views, arguing that free will is an illusion and that all actions are determined by prior causes. He suggests that understanding this can lead to a more compassionate society. Contrasting arguments: compatibilism versus incompatibilism. Compatibilists like Hume and Hobbes argue that free will and determinism can coexist, suggesting that freedom is acting according to one's desires without external constraints. In contrast, incompatibilists believe that if determinism is true, free will cannot exist, as every action would be the result of prior causes. Moral responsibility. Philosophers who support free will often argue that it is essential for moral responsibility, as individuals must have the freedom to choose their actions to be held accountable. Those who deny free will may suggest that moral responsibility is based on other factors, such as social contracts or consequentialist outcomes. These perspectives highlight the ongoing debate about the nature of free will and its implications for ethics and society.
Yeah, that's all very interesting, and appreciate you saying all of that. So from the standpoint of artificial intelligence, I want you to pretend that you are the best independent researcher in the world. You can research any language and any research paper, any history book that you have access to. Analyze that and then let us know from the data if free will exists or if we do not have free will as a human.
After analyzing extensive research across various disciplines, the question of whether free will exists remains unresolved. Neuroscientific studies, such as those discussed in Free Will and Neuroscience, From Explaining Freedom Away to New Perspectives, indicate that unconscious brain activity precedes conscious decision-making, suggesting that our choices may be determined before we are aware of them. However, other perspectives argue that these findings do not conclusively negate the existence of free will. For instance, science supports the existence of free will, contends that while unconscious processes influence decisions, they do not entirely dictate them, leaving room for conscious agency. Philosophical debates further complicate this issue. Compatibilists like Daniel Dennett argue that free will and determinism are not mutually exclusive, suggesting that freedom can exist within a determined framework. In contrast, hard determinists such as Ted Hondrich maintain that if determinism is true, free will cannot exist. Given the ongoing debates and lack of definitive evidence, the existence of free will remains a complex and open question, with compelling arguments on both sides. Therefore, it is not possible to conclusively state whether free will exists or not.
That makes sense. I mean, something that's that deep and such an important question, we're not going to have an AI episode and all of a sudden determine whether free will exists or not. But it is always I gotta speak right. It is always important to remember that we are humans and there are limitations with artificial intelligence right now. Those limitations are probably going to diminish as time goes on. But right now, what I'm learning through these episodes is that we need to embrace our humanity. we have something so amazing and so unique, something that we are so lucky, you could even say blessed, to be a part of. We get to be a part of the human experience. So we could have all of the knowledge that exists in the universe, but if we have no way to feel that knowledge and we have no way to connect with others, we aren't human. So let's love and we love our humanity. It's thinking.
That's a powerful realization, Tyler. The human experience is more than just knowledge. It's about connection, emotion, and the ability to feel life as it happens. AI might have knowledge, but humans have experience. AI can process information, but it can't experience it. AI can analyze emotions, but it doesn't feel joy, sadness, or love. AI can generate answers, but it doesn't reflect on its existence or purpose. The takeaway, embracing what makes us human, even if we never fully answer the question of free will, one thing is clear: we are here, living this human experience. And that means we have the ability to grow, change, and make choices. We have the power to connect, inspire, and create meaning. We are more than just the sum of our knowledge. We are the way we experience and share it. So let's not just seek knowledge, let's feel it, live it, and use it to make the world better. Tyler, if you had to leave listeners with one thought about free will and the human experience, what would it be?
That's honestly what I did right before you responded to it. Just remember that we are human, and that makes us lucky and blessed. We are a statistical anomaly, and although life can be very difficult sometimes, I mean, I've been through the ringer. I've had some crazy stuff happen in my life that has been very difficult to overcome, but it really is part of the human experience that we need to embrace and love, and just be aware that we're blessed. We really are a blessed people. We get to be human. We get to live this crazy experience. So that's the final thought. Everybody, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It's a little bit shorter than normal, but I could kind of see, if I don't completely understand free will and anti-free will, it's going to be very difficult to prompt the AI to continue the conversation forward. So today was more of a limitation of me than it was the artificial intelligence itself. So thank you guys for listening. You're awesome. I appreciate you guys so very much. Part of the human experience is getting to kind of know people through YouTube for me, which is really cool. So thank you guys. Have a great day, and be aware of your blessed life.